It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Washington. I'm Yalda Hakim. Our top story tonight, Donald Trump's triumphant return to the White House. Written off and put on trial, but now the candidate who pulled off one of the biggest comebacks in political history.
Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again. And I'm asking every citizen all across our land to join me in this noble and righteous endeavor.
The candidate for the devastated Democrats, Kamala Harris, concedes defeat and tells her supporters not to despair.
The light of America's promise will always burn bright.
Economy, bottom line, economy. We got to stop giving it away.
As Republicans celebrate the evidence it was the economy which drove the support for Donald Trump. Why Elon Musk and those who own shares in his companies may be jumping for joy as the world's richest man celebrates the victory of the man he backed. And as Sir Keir Starmer joins world leaders in congratulating Donald Trump, he gets a taste of the challenges he and they will face. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview later in the hour. Good evening from Washington. Donald Trump doesn't stint on superlatives, but for once the words he used to describe his return to the most powerful job in the world didn't overstate. It was unprecedented and magnificent, he said, as he heralded what he called a golden age of America. Tonight, the woman he defeated, Vice President Kamala Harris, conceded defeat, but said she didn't concede the fight that fueled her campaign. Well, the most damning fact for the Democrats, though, was that Donald Trump's re-election as president 4 years after he was ejected unwillingly from the White House wasn't, in electoral terms, even close. Not all the results are in, but Donald Trump has 291 votes in the Electoral College, compared to just 223 for Kamala Harris. Our U.S. correspondent James Matthews has our first report tonight on Donald Trump's historic return to power.
Overnight, America had flagged a change in direction. Again, the shores of Palm Beach harbour the seat of power. In Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump woke up president-elect.
This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond.
This was the Trump Watch Party. Here they called it the greatest political comeback of all time.
Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again. And I'm asking every citizen all across our land to join me in this noble and righteous endeavor. That's what it is. It's time to put the divisions of the past 4 years behind us. It's time to unite. And we're going to try. We have to try. And it's going to happen. Success will bring us together. I've seen that.
This stage show was choreographed from early in the evening. Soon after polls closed, results were drifting in Donald Trump's direction.
Sky News is projecting that Donald Trump has won the state of North Carolina.
One by one, the swing states swung his way. These were supporters of Kamala Harris on Election Day. This was the contrast the day after. In Washington, D.C., they lined up to hear her concession speech. It was late afternoon on a business day that included business with Donald Trump. She called to congratulate him on his win.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, Hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. But we accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
It was billed as a close contest. Ultimately, it wasn't. Donald Trump took the presidency, and Republicans made significant gains in Congress. This country's politics for the next 4 years is in the firm grip of Donald Trump and Trumpism.
Thrilled, excited, looking forward to the golden years.
It's awesome. I feel God has answered our prayers, and I think we're going to have a great next 4 years, and hopefully 4 more and 4 more after that.
It is the return of their chosen one, a new dawn in American politics, same as the old one. James Matthews, Sky News, in Mar-a-Lago, Florida.
Well, let's go straight to James, who joins us from Mar-a-Lago tonight. And of course, Martha is she was with the Kamala Harris camp, where we were just hearing her concession speech. But first, to you, James, I mean, what a night it's been for Donald Trump.
Yeah, what a night indeed. I think there was cautious optimism, certainly, and you could see on the faces of people gathered inside the convention centre a wary sense that things might go their way, because that's what they believed early on in the night. But I think they didn't let themselves get too committed. But of course, as the results started to come in, you sensed in this cavernous arena a growing sense of expectation that it was in the bag. And of course, there were big TV screens, and those swing states, one by one, the cheers went up. And as the crowd got bigger, the sense of anticipation of Donald Trump arriving grew. And it was kind of rock star stuff at 3 in the morning when he turned up on stage, flanked by his family. He gave a speech, something like 40 minutes. For me, it rather killed the moment. I mean, Donald Trump, it was vintage Trump, spoke for about 40 minutes at that late hour, told some of the old stories that we've heard many times before on the campaign trail. So as a speech, not great, didn't quite meet that historic moment perhaps, but it was victory. And this whole place just exuded that sense that their politics were back on track, and back on track they certainly are, not just with the presidency, Yalda, but as I said in my report, that grip on the Senate, potentially on the House of Representatives as well. That's what Donald Trump needs to have to push through Trumpism as he knows it, and as America got acquainted with in his previous term. I mean, he has enjoyed a clean sweep, and it's a clear road ahead for Donald Trump now, tapped into key demographics, of course, Latinos, the black vote, and in particular, the bro vote. Young men, that's where he scored in big style.
James, thank you so much. Well, let's go straight to Martha. And Martha, just in the last few minutes, we heard that concession speech from Kamala Harris.
Yeah, perhaps the last major speech on a stage like this that we'll ever hear from Kamala Harris. It's hard to see, given the completeness of this defeat, where her political career goes next. But she did strike an optimistic tone, certainly urging resilience and comforting her supporters really here, offering them words of reassurance, repeating that mantra that we've heard throughout her campaign: when we fight, we win. I could see some signs of emotion on her face, particularly halfway through this speech when the crowd burst into spontaneous chants, really, of "we love you." I think I saw her get a little glassy-eyed, and certainly some of her family here in the crowd very emotional indeed. Her stepdaughter Ella, who's been part of her campaign, part of the rallying cry, particularly for Gen Z voters online. She was crying as Harris was delivering this speech. Tim Walz was here, her running mate, his wife Gwen and daughter Hope. They were both wearing dark sunglasses on what is a cloudy day in Washington, D.C., perhaps to try and disguise some signs of emotion. But the mood here could not be more different to this time yesterday. There was an awful lot of hope in the crowd here, people thinking that Kamala Harris was going to upset the polls, that she was going to pull off this remarkable history-making victory over Donald Trump. It changed so quickly. In between Georgia and North Carolina being declared for Donald Trump, a hush descended here. It was so quiet I could hear a drone hovering overhead, despite the fact that this was a 10,000-strong crowd. And indeed, today, many of the faces in the crowd, a lot of young black women, part of the same sorority that Kamala Harris was when she was at university here, a lot of their faces tear-stained, utterly dejected at this result, unsure where this country is heading next.
Martha, thank you so much. Now, it's more than 30 years since we heard that phrase, "It's the economy, stupid," which was coined by an advisor to Bill Clinton. And that was what we heard today, loud and clear, in the states which decided this election from voters backing Donald Trump. Well, the Republican candidate has won every single one of those so-called swing states, which had declared so far. In Georgia, he has won more than half of the vote and 2 percentage points more than Kamala Harris. Let's go to Michigan now, and it was tighter, but he was still more than 75,000 votes ahead. And in Pennsylvania, with over 98% of votes in, he is more than 100,000 votes ahead. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, is in Pennsylvania and reports on what swung the election for Donald Trump in the battleground states.
In a Philadelphia diner, they were digesting the news with their breakfast. Their state had won it for Donald Trump. For some, this has been a one-issue election.
Economy, bottom line, economy. We got to stop giving it away.
What has it been like living under Joe Biden's economy?
Oh, Jesus. It was one of the worst. One of the worst that I have experienced in my lifetime. You know?
Many hope Donald Trump will restore their fortunes.
I sold my house and moved in with my daughter because I couldn't afford my mortgage anymore. I don't have a lot of money to do the things I want with. My money has gotten very small.
And do you think Donald Trump will help with that?
If he doesn't, I might kick him in the butt.
Then we have your other little, like the log cabins over there.
In her gift shop over the road, Rosemary Veneziali sells nostalgia and souvenirs and hopes Donald Trump can bring back the good times because she says he understands what Americans have been going through.
He sees it. He knows it. He's seeing the people suffer. He's seeing them not be able to buy food. He's seeing all the things that we could have, we don't have.
There was euphoria amongst Trump supporters last night when Pennsylvania swung to Donald Trump. They knew their state would prove pivotal in winning back the White House in his extraordinary comeback.
It's been said that this election has been like no other, but the story we've heard from voters up and down this crucial swing state is one we've heard many times before in America. The issue that came up more than any other was the price of food and fuel. Yet again, it seems it was the economy that mattered the most.
From Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, from diners to doorsteps, the same refrain. Americans do not feel as well off now as they did under Trump.
Anybody who can't see that this country fell off a cliff over the last 4 years is an idiot. And I hate to say that because I don't want to feel that way towards my countrymen, but it's just the fact.
The same sentiment right across Pennsylvania has helped shift the state decisively to Donald Trump and drive him to victory. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Philadelphia.
Well, we heard there that the economy motivated many voters to back Donald Trump, and for the Democratic Party, there will now be a post-mortem on why many of the key voter groups failed to turn out in anything like enough numbers to give Kamala Harris a path to victory. Well, here's our US election data analyst, Lewis Goodall.
Donald Trump has put together by far the most diverse coalition for the Republican Party since the 1980s. 1 in 3 ethnic minority American voters voted for Donald Trump yesterday, something that many people would have found incredible just a few days ago. Let me give you a demonstration of how he did it. Hispanic voters, Latino voters, perhaps some of the most striking of all of this. Let's just go through, shall we, exactly what the lead was by party, by Hispanic voters for all of the elections going back to 2008. We see huge leads for the Democratic Party with Barack Obama for Hispanics, 36% in 2008. Barack Obama actually builds on that in 2012 to 44%. In that year. 2016, Hillary Clinton loses, obviously, to Donald Trump, but still has 38% lead. 2020, Joe Biden enjoys a 33% lead. So it's been going down a bit. But look at this. Look at this. The Democrats now only have a lead of 8% among Hispanic voters, a demographic group that historically they have banked on to be a core part of their coalition. We can also say the same thing with African-American voters as well. African-American voters, which are the backbone of the Democratic Party. 2008, a 91% lead among African-Americans for Barack Obama. 2012, 87%, 81% in 2016, 75% in 2020, and a modest reduction in 2024 to 74%, driven in particular by a reduction in African-American men voting for the party. Again, it's not much, but it all adds up. And let me just demonstrate via the map exactly how that can have an effect. So let's take African-American voters for a start. Let's look at somewhere like Michigan. You can see here, Michigan, a state which has only just been called Michigan statewide, 99% of the vote for Donald Trump. Detroit is a place where historically the African-American vote has been weighed for the Democratic Party. You can see here Kamala Harris is still carrying Wayne County, which is the home of Detroit, 62.7%. But have a look at this. Joe Biden, 68.4%. In 2020, Hillary Clinton 66.8% in 2016, and Barack Obama 73% in 2012. You can see a long-scale secular decline in the African-American vote, which has come home to haunt the Democrats this time. Likewise, if we go down to the other end of the country, on the Hispanic vote side, in Florida, and look at Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade County, on the southern tip of Florida, is somewhere where, again, the Democrats used to weigh Hispanic votes for the first time since the mid-1980s, since 1984, and the Ronald Reagan landslide of that year. This as a county has flipped Republican. You can see here in 2020, Joe Biden carried the county by 53%. In 2016, Hillary Clinton carried the county by 63% and Obama by 61% in 2012. So you can see that the rainbow coalition of voters that the Democratic Party has enjoyed historically and has relied upon is starting to fray. That is why this is an election result which in so many ways is so much worse for the Democrats than it was in 2016 when Donald Trump won the first time around. The first time around, Donald Trump could say that, or the Democrats could say about Donald Trump, that he enjoyed a coalition of older white voters in rural counties and the future electorate of the United States, the diverse, the young, and so on, were on the Democrats' side. They thought that the future map was for them. We are seeing now that, in fact, the map as it looks today is more diverse, and it is for Donald Trump.
That was Lewis Goodall there. Well, the gender gap was always going to be a crucial factor in the contest, and both candidates played on that. Donald Trump was determined to motivate men to turn out to vote, and Kamala Harris campaigned heavily on issues like reproductive rights. But that approach didn't, in the end, have the same impact. Well, our correspondent Cordelia Lynch reports from Georgia on why the Democrats' hopes for the women's vote getting Kamala Harris to the White House didn't materialize.
In Georgia, jubilation. It was the economy and immigration, not abortion, that defined this election.
So, but how are you doing today?
I just feel like I'm in a fever dream. Like this, I feel exactly how I did in 2016.
In Atlanta, Democrats are crestfallen.
Are you surprised she didn't do better with female voters?
The disparity for the results is shocking, for sure. I think that's the most shocking part of it. Just how much more we needed to have gotten her elected.
Kamala Harris took a risk, putting reproductive rights at the top of her agenda. It didn't deliver. Yes, there were some wins, restrictive abortion bans undone in 7 states, but activists feel abandoned.
I feel let down, honestly, by first and foremost, white women voters in this country. White women in this particular election in 2024, at least in the presidential realm, voted at almost the exact same rate that they voted for the same person who is a convicted felon, an adjudicated rapist, and the very person who is proudly telling you that he snatched away your reproductive rights.
In so many rural and suburban areas, though, it was other anxieties that dominated.
Why couldn't Democrats win over women like you?
I don't think she ever talked about anything that were the points that meant the most to me. The economy, the immigration, the crime that came with the immigration.
Are you ready for a female president?
A woman who served at a high rank in the military might very well make a good president. But a woman who's been a prosecutor in a very left state, I don't think so.
The gender gap did play out in the election results. Women did favor Kamala Harris, but not nearly enough to cement her victory. She needed an earthquake. She got a rumble, one arguably eclipsed by the noisy sound of young men.
Tradition still runs deep in America. A woman of colour will not taste life at the helm this time. A crossroads, once again, passed over. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Georgia.
Well, Donald Trump's first run at the White House was propelled by the votes of white, blue-collar male voters. They were back and forth this time, but a second Trump presidency has been made possible by a much more complex and unlikely coalition, including voter groups the Harris campaign was banking on. Our correspondent, Yusra El-Bagir, reports from Michigan on the changing nature of Trump's supporters.
Okay, Trump wins. Everybody got it wrong. But
this is the morning after. Little sleep and lots of opinions.
I believe it's over because you couldn't even deliver Michigan for the Democrats.
A Detroit podcast on the pulse of America.
Black people, white people, brown people, we've been here forever. And I think we all see there's no food in the cupboard. I can't put gas in the car.
As a woman of color, how did the Harris campaign speak to you, or how did you feel of it?
Well, I want to take that out because I'm a person that's been in politics, and I've been a person that's been in media, and I've been a resident who is aware of and sensitive to the challenges of people. So, I mean, I'm all for, you know, the first woman, the first this, the first that, but I wanted substance. You know, I wanted to hear policy and not promises. I wanted to hear a plan and a conversation that didn't feel performative.
West of here.
And in Detroit, one of the blackest cities in the country, there's a bid to understand how black support for the Democrats dropped in this election.
So you think the way that they're doing this, like the black vote, the Latino vote, the Muslim vote, do you think that's degrading?
It is degrading because don't tell me based on my race, religion, pigmentation that I should vote a certain way. They overlook class in the same way that Hillary Clinton 8 years ago took the black vote as well as the unionized community for granted.
If you want to get how America voted, you've got to get to Michigan. It's a cross-section of American society. You've got the white working class, you've got a huge black population, Hispanics, and here in Dearborn, the heart of Arab America.
And at one of Dearborn's loved restaurants, the head of Arab Americans for Trump is having a celebratory meal, receiving congratulations from another Arab leader supporting a third-party candidate. For Dr. Bashara, the pathway to peace in Gaza is through Trump.
He reached out to our community, you know, and our community in return returned the favor and voted for him and voted him in.
The gaps Harris left open, exploited by her opponent.
The killing has to stop, and it has to stop immediately.
Now gaping in the wake of her loss. Yusra El-Bagir, Sky News, Michigan.
Donald Trump and his party could be heading towards the kind of power that the country's founding fathers did everything in their power to prevent. A second Trump presidency means that they have regained the White House, even as conservatives hold a stranglehold over the Supreme Court. But perhaps just as important for Donald Trump's agenda is that the Republicans have gained control of the Senate with at least 52 senators, and they could also win control of the House of Representatives, a clean sweep of the branches of government. They're currently on 207, 11 short of a majority. Well, our US correspondent Mark Stone reports on the new president's power and what he might do with it.
America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate.
A result which came in the dead of night, but a decision made eyes wide open.
We have taken back control of the Senate. Wow, that's good.
Because America knows Trump, it chose him again, and it awarded him, it seems, a clean sweep.
And it also looks like we'll be keeping control of the House of Representatives.
Dark storm or new dawn, we'll see. But one thing is clear, power was cemented overnight.
So what will all this look like after the ride that was his first presidency, after all the warnings from the critics and all the rhetoric from the man himself?
You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, 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 other than day one. I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
So how much of this is bombast? After all, his first term was hardly one of fulfilled promises. So will he break these or finish the job he started, this time unopposed?
We've already had Trump as president of the United States, and the Republic still stands. I mean, there's no difference in Donald Trump 1.0 versus this Donald Trump 2.0, except for the fact that Donald Trump 2.0 has a very keen understanding on how Washington works.
In the heart of the place he may now fully control, the old guard of a Republican Party reset, reflecting on the achievement.
Let me start by congratulating President Trump. What he's accomplished has not been done, as all of you know, since Grover Cleveland, which was a while back.
Landslides allow mandates to be delivered, and the clues for the road ahead may be here. Project 2025, written by the people who helped him to victory. Not all of this will be adopted, but plenty will be. Deportations, tariffs, more power to the presidency, wholesale reform of government.
Take over, Elon, yes, take over.
In the days ahead, the transition team will emerge to include, maybe, those who he has already outlined his plans with.
And what I'm going to do, one of the first acts, and this is where I need an Elon Musk, I need somebody that has a lot of strength and courage and smarts. I want to close up Department of Education, move education back to the states.
I think you're making a good point.
Then there's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., anti-vaxxer, climate activist. What will his influence be?
You will not take any vaccine that is currently on the market.
If vaccines are working for somebody, I'm not going to take them away. People ought to have a choice, and that choice ought to be informed by the best information.
The victory was clean, decisive. Now comes the delivery. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
And Mark joins me here in the studio. Mark, I mean, it's been an extraordinary few months and quite an extraordinary night. I mean, we were here all night reporting the outcome.
And we're still going. Yeah, look, I think the Democrats talked so much about demographics. They made so many assumptions that different groups of people would vote for them. But in the end, I don't think it was about demographics. It wasn't about people's colour, their ethnicity. They voted why they voted, because they are Americans. And it wasn't also about micro issues. It was everything. I mean, you've seen it there in the reports that we've had from around the country. It was about the economy. It was about immigration. It was about so many different issues that a majority of Americans thought the Democrats, Joe Biden, who didn't step down in time perhaps for them to reset, and Kamala Harris, who came after him and could not beat Donald Trump. So many Americans were just unhappy with the leftward creep of the Democratic Party, and so they chose the man that came before.
Mark, you know, very early on in the night, we saw a graph of an exit poll which talked about how democracy was actually something that people were very concerned about. And we sort of talked about the fact that actually it's not just those from the Democratic side of the aisle who were worried about this. You talked about travelling across this country and finding Donald Trump supporters are also concerned.
Very much so. Look, I mean, I've been thinking back at pieces, reports, stories I've done over the course of the past few years. And for a time, we wondered if we were just going to very Trumpy areas, because we constantly got people telling us, no, actually, Donald Trump's the guy. He's rough around the edges. But on policy, he seems to deliver, and we like what he's offering. And I suppose this year the penny began to drop that, no, this isn't just Trumpy areas. It is a majority of Americans, as we discovered last night.
And now we have a nation that feels very much divided, and it's going to be an uphill battle for Donald Trump. I mean, that speech he gave, he was magnanimous, wasn't he, in the speech? Strikingly so. But let's see how it goes. But yeah, half the country ecstatic today. A little less than half the country very nervous. Yeah, we'll have to see how things unfold over the course of the next 4 years. Mark, thank you so much for all of your reporting. Now, Sir Keir Starmer had a taste today of what life with Donald Trump may look like. He was confronted in the House of Commons with a quote from his own Foreign Secretary calling the next US leader a woman-hating sociopath. And he's not the only world leader who will be challenged in his dealings with the next president. Well, our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes reports on the global impact of Donald Trump's re-election starting in the UK.
Warm words from the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by congratulating President-elect Trump on his historic election victory.
Then came the cold reality check from his new opponent about the difficulties of dealing with Donald Trump.
The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met him in September. Did the Foreign Secretary take that opportunity to apologise for making derogatory and scatological references, including, and I quote, Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order.
The Foreign Secretary and I did meet President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago for dinner for about a couple of hours, and we discussed a number of issues of global significance.
Regardless of what's said in public, officials here and in most NATO capitals across Europe are bracing themselves for another 4 years of Donald Trump rather than celebrating his return. Many expect there to be renewed tensions with Washington and much greater unpredictability when it comes to tackling global threats.
First among them is Russia's war in Ukraine. The president-elect has vowed to end the conflict, but without explaining how. With Vladimir Putin looming large, Ukraine's leader needs Donald Trump on his side.
On defence, on the economy, and on the future after the war, we have the potential for stronger cooperation. This is what will make Ukraine, America, and the entire free world more successful.
Then there is the world's other escalating crisis between Israel and Iran. The Israeli Prime Minister among the first to call Trump to congratulate him and talk about the Iranian threat. He'll surely be hoping for ever greater US support, maybe even a green light for Israel to bomb Iranian nuclear sites. One thing's clear, America's allies and its enemies are about to encounter a very different White House. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, we saw there in Deborah's piece from Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. He was one of the first world leaders to put out a tweet congratulating Donald Trump. We've had a bit of an update. He said that I have had an excellent call with President Donald Trump and congratulated him on his historic landslide victory. His tremendous campaign made this result possible. I praised his family and team for their great work. We agreed to maintain close dialogue and advance our cooperation cooperation. Strong and unwavering US leadership is vital for the world and for a just peace. So Volodymyr Zelensky responding there, saying that he's just spoken to Donald Trump and has put that out on X. Well, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is in Downing Street for us because, of course, Sam, Sir Keir Starmer has also spoken with the president-elect.
That's right, Yalda. The call took place in the last few hours, and we've had something of a readout. But if I'm being honest, there are not a huge amount of details about the call in that rather anodyne. I think that speaks to the fact that the relationship is likely to be quite bumpy in the weeks, months and years ahead. It had the normal pleasantries. Keir Starmer offered his hearty congratulations to the president-elect. He remembered fondly his dinner in September that was referred to in the House of Commons chamber, where Keir Starmer and his Foreign Secretary David Lammy met with President Trump for a couple of hours in Trump Tower. They briefed that out as a gesture of friendship. Keir Starmer clearly chose to pick up one subject to raise with the president-elect, and that was the Middle East. He reminded Donald Trump of the importance of regional stability. There is a sense that Israel might take the election result as a green light to go ahead with stuff they otherwise might not have done, but with consequences for escalation, we know not where that might end. But what the statement didn't do, Yalda, was really speak to the wider concerns I think there are in the building behind me, not just the things that Deborah was talking about in her report, like NATO, Ukraine, the Middle East, but also just what that greater sense of instability might mean, particularly if there are tariffs introduced by Donald Trump and particularly hitting the British economy. Already, economists are downgrading next year's growth forecasts off the back of the election. The fear is that what goes on the other side of the Atlantic has a direct impact on the politics and the economics of this country. That's why Keir Starmer's got a very difficult path to manage in the weeks and months ahead.
Sam, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Now let's look at some of today's news away from the US election. And Ireland is set for an election later this month after its Prime Minister confirmed that he would dissolve Parliament on Friday. Simon Harris said that he hoped to hold the election on the 29th of November. It will bring an end to the historic coalition between his Fine Gael party and the Fianna Fáil party formed 4 years ago. Prince William has given an update on the Princess of Wales's health. Kate revealed in September she had completed chemotherapy after the discovery of precancerous cells in March. The Prince was speaking ahead of tonight's Earthshot Prize Award in Cape Town.
It's been a tough year for you. How is the Princess?
She's doing really well, thanks, and hopefully she's watching tonight and sort of cheering me on. But no, she's been amazing this whole year, and I know she'll be really keen to see it tonight be a success.
A fourth UK case of a strain of Mpox thought to spread more easily has been detected. The UK Health Security Agency says the overall risk to the population remains low. The patient is a household contact of the first UK case, which was detected in London at the end of October. They're currently receiving specialist care. Now, Donald Trump cast himself as the great healer in his victory speech. His many opponents prefer to see him as the great divider, while across the world, friend and foe acknowledge him as the great disruptor of international norms. But even if there is never going to be a consensus on his qualities, the next president of the United States is undoubtedly a history maker.
This was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again. Oh, we overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible. Take a look at what happened. Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. Take over, Elon, yes, take over.
If you don't mind, I want to work the French fry counter.
Look what happened. Is this crazy? This will forever be remembered as the day the American people regained control of their country.
That was Sky News at 10 on this historic day. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined here in Washington by the Hill's associate editor, Niall Stanich, and the Telegraph's deputy U.S. editor, Rosina Sabor. Among the stories we'll be discussing, the story on the front of the Financial Times, their headline, "Trump is back." We'll be right back.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Look at that sheet of flames, and it's moving this way. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail.
The people here are praying quietly to themselves.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Now they're trying to finish the job off so that they can move into the square. Okay, it's okay, don't worry, it's okay. They're becoming very sensitive about having the media around.
They have no protective masks or protective equipment at all.
We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Every time they touch them, they spray.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients, made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Perilously close to the vineyards. I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Now it's time to see what's making the headlines with the Hill's associate editor, Niall Stanich, and the Telegraph's deputy US editor, Rosina Sabor, who joins me, both of them here in Washington. So let's see what's been making the headlines. The Financial Times has the simple headline, "Trump is back," and calls his victory a resounding triumph. The eye is even simpler with the one-word splash, landslide. The Telegraph describes it as a Trump's clean sweep. A comeback to Trump or comebacks is how the Mail puts it. The Guardian reflects a feeling of dread among his detractors, referencing his time as host of the US version of The Apprentice. The Sun proclaims, "You're rehired," with a cheeky nod to Mr. Trump's tan. The Metro heralds America's golden age, and the Star contrasts some less than complimentary remarks the Foreign Secretary David Lammy made about Trump a few years ago with his congratulatory tweet to the president-elect today. As the paper puts it, well, this is awkward. I'm just welcoming in my guests. It's been quite a night, and let's just have a look at the Financial Times, because they've said, Trump is back. I do recall, actually, that is what Joe Biden and his administration said at the time. I remember speaking to Antony Blinken, who said America is back, and now we're seeing this front page.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the huge story is the fact that he has made such a comeback, having previously seemed that his political career was obviously finished. I was outside the Capitol, just a few hundred yards from where we're speaking right now, on January 6th, 2021. Nobody of any political persuasion believed that then President Trump had any path back to a credible political career. It was assumed that he would be dismissed in ignominy, and now he's been elected president again. Whether one likes it or not, it is an extraordinary Lazarus-like revival.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're seeing, just to Niall's point, whether anyone likes it or not. It has been sort of a historic political comeback.
Absolutely, but I think it's also worth noting that this is as much a repudiation of the current administration as it is Donald Trump's success.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to talk about that point, I've been speaking all day to Democrats, actually, who say that, Joe Biden said that he would be a one-term president and that perhaps he left it too long, that, she only did have 16 weeks to put a campaign together.
Yeah, I mean, it was a debacle from the Democratic side. Joe Biden had that disastrous debate in late June against Donald Trump. That then kicked off about 3 or 4 weeks of crisis. Then ultimately Biden did step aside under enormous pressure from Nancy Pelosi and other very leading Democrats. Look, I think there is a lot of second guessing. None of it, interestingly, is saying Joe Biden should have stayed on and fought the election. I think everyone assumes he would have got annihilated.
I think the only person saying that is probably Joe Biden.
Absolutely, yeah. So, there's that. There is a question of whether someone else would have done better than Harris, but the problem there is how would you have both pressured Biden out and leaped past a black woman who was the incumbent vice president? Pretty difficult to do that, given the internal dynamics of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're looking at a post-mortem at this stage. I mean, we're not even 24 hours since this election, so there is a lot of pain and licking of wounds from the Democratic Party and the supporters. But there are questions also being asked about whether, had Joe Biden stepped aside sooner, would that have given them time to have an actual process?
Yes, and as you say, Joe Biden promised to be, hand over the torch with his first term to be a kind of bridge to a new generation of Democratic leadership. He then rode back on that promise and vowed to fight a second term in the belief that he was the only candidate that could have defeated Donald Trump. I think the results do show that actually, it is incredibly difficult for an incumbent party with the kind of approval ratings that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had to actually regain the presidency, keep hold of the White House. And as you say, the Democratic blame game has already begun. We've heard from Bernie Sanders tonight saying there wasn't enough focus on working class voters. We've heard from operatives in the key swing states saying, had Kamala Harris gone with a different vice presidential candidate, perhaps the result would have been different, particularly, operatives in Pennsylvania talking about the fact that had Josh Shapiro, the very popular, very charismatic governor of that critical state, been the Democratic vice presidential nominee, perhaps this race would have gone differently. Now, whether that's true remains a question.
Yeah, because she was up against a candidate whose third time on the ballot, 9 years we've had of Donald Trump's sort of political career played out. And she, frankly, had about 100 days.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very short-term campaign for Kamala Harris, and of course, back in 2020, she had run a pretty underwhelming primary campaign in the Democratic Party. So I think Democrats felt that they had to, in a sense, swallow their doubts about her and just hope that she would give them at least a better shot than Biden. In relation to the Shapiro argument, I hear the argument. I don't actually agree with it. I think that in many ways, Josh Shapiro had made some comments about pro-Palestinian demonstrators that would have cost Harris in Michigan as much as they would have benefited her in Pennsylvania. She went with Tim Walz. I can understand the argument for that, which was more about Midwestern charm, Coach Walz and all of that. It didn't work, but I'm not sure that the VP pick was the central issue.
Let's just bring up the Guardian's front page, and it says The Guardian reflects a feeling of dread among his detractors, and also they've described it as American dread. I mean, at the end of the day, there are people who support him, and this nation has voted, and this is how democracy works. But this also is a deeply divided country.
Absolutely, and I think the results really do bear that out. It looks like Donald Trump is on course to claim all of the swing states, but we don't have results for all of them in yet. But nevertheless, the results in all of them was very tight. I think Kamala Harris spoke to that tonight in her concession speech. She talked about the hurt and the pain that her supporters will be feeling, but put a focus on the peaceful transfer of power and congratulating Donald Trump on his victory tonight.
Let me just jump in there, Yolanda, and show my age a little bit, because the first presidential election I covered in this country was back in 2004, when the incumbent President George W. Bush was going up against Democrat John Kerry. At the time, that seemed as divisive as it could possibly get. The Iraq War was going on. There were very, very high feelings. This year, we have the Democratic nominee calling the Republican nominee a fascist, and lots of people in her party agreeing with her. The Republican nominee blasting the Democratic nominee as, a low IQ individual and other even less tasteful remarks. And I do think it points to that polarisation that has grown so deep and so intense in this country.
But now you'll also remember from that 2004 election that George W. Bush actually waited until he was certain that he'd actually won this election. I mean, it feels like a different sort of time, doesn't it? There was something we felt here watching things unfold. Quite bizarre that Kamala Harris sort of packed up and left and told supporters to go home and we'll deal with this in the morning, while we had sort of a declaration of victory from the other side before the networks had sort of even announced it.
Yeah, it just speaks to the unprecedented nature of US politics in this day and age. But there was a lot of Democratic frustration with the Harris campaign about the radio silence, not just last night, but even, up until late this afternoon. The campaign, we're told, hadn't actually reached out to volunteers and to donors to thank them for their contributions and to give them any talking points, actually, to go out onto the media and dissect the aftermath of this campaign.
Let's bring up the Telegraph. Nigel Farage has written for the Telegraph. Have a look at this. He's said that it's a remarkable victory, piles the pressure on Starmer. I mean, world leaders at the moment scrambling and racing to congratulate Donald Trump. In fact, Kamala Harris hadn't even, conceded defeat. She just sort of disappeared, and Donald Trump hadn't even gotten through his victory speech, and we're starting to see the statements and the words of congratulations pouring in. All the phone calls had started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they used to say about the boxing promoter Don King that he would climb over the guy who'd just been knocked out to reach the winner, whether that was his promoter or not. And there's a little bit of that going on with world leaders, people who had previously disdained or been very critical of Donald Trump rushing to his side now. Keir Starmer, David Lammy will have some challenges in that respect. They have been critical of Trump in the past. We'll see how they handle that. Trump is somebody who I think basically just essentially warms up to anybody who warms up to him. It's not that he necessarily holds on to grudges unless you remain in opposition to him.
I would absolutely agree with that, and having spoken to senior members of his campaign, you know, they are very pragmatic about this, and I've asked them specifically about comments made by members of the Labour government, and they said, look, we will work with whoever is in office. They absolutely take a very pragmatic approach to this. I think Sir Keir Starmer and David Lammy feel that they achieved quite a coup in getting a dinner with Donald Trump in September. It went on for a considerable period of time, and the readouts from both sides were quite positive. So, yes, some difficult comments in the past to overcome, but, both sides taking a pragmatic approach to this.
Yeah, and beyond that, I mean, we've been showing Volodymyr Zelensky, for example, tweeting out yesterday, again today, saying I've spoken to him. You know, we both have said that we will continue to have an open dialogue. He's in a very difficult situation right now and position, given we have had a bit of an idea of what this administration might do in terms of Ukraine.
Yeah, and a much clearer idea on Ukraine than, say, the Middle East, where Trump has been kind of all over the place, honestly. On Ukraine, it's very, very clear. Donald Trump does not believe that US aid to Ukraine should continue at the clip it has proceeded under President Biden. He is more isolationist. Generally, he says he would resolve the war in one day, but what he appears to mean is that he would pressure the Ukrainians to give up perhaps significant amounts of territory in order to gain that peace. And of course, you have his rather unusual warmth toward Vladimir Putin. So you put all that together, it's a bit of a recipe for disaster, I fear, for Mr. Zelensky.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ukrainians are worried at this point in time from what they've heard so far from the Trump camp.
Yes, and actually perhaps more worried about what J.D. Vance, the Vice President-elect, has had to say about this, perhaps taking an even harder line than Donald Trump has on this. And, you know, his role in the next administration is quite unclear. Will he act more as a prime minister, or will he serve as a kind of ceremonial office holder? I suspect the former rather than the latter, and if he takes on, you know, the Ukraine brief and is the point person for the Trump administration, then that could be very worrying indeed for the Zelensky government.
Yeah, well, Rosina, Niall, hold that thought because we will talk a little bit more about the Vice President-elect. We've got a lot more coming up on the programme next, so do stay with us. Lots more coming up, discussions around the US election. The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.